So I'm here today with a friend of mine, Alison Carpio, and we met, I think, a couple of years ago now, through the Copy Chief community. And since then, you have really, I know you've done a lot with that community, and we've had the chance to work together on a few occasions with different clients. And I wanted to bring you on and have a conversation today for businesses that need to do customer research, because of all the people I know in direct marketing and copywriting and this whole world of the internet, you are by far probably the expert when it comes down to customer research, avatar development, and really understanding the customer. And I think a lot of the businesses that I work with, they've done a certain degree of that, but they've left it at such a superficial level where they think if they know, if their avatar is a man or a woman, they give it a silly name, Sue, Bob, or Joe, and they know a little bit about what positions they are and very superficial demographical type information. While that's useful and helps a business to refine their list of potential prospects, what really matters is the meat and potatoes of what you do. So I wanted to introduce you to everyone that I work with and have a conversation today about how you kind of perceive this customer research, how you go about it. And I know your methodologies and results are kind of second to none. So welcome, everyone. This is Alison. And Alison, you're in San Francisco, right?
I am. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and chat about this stuff. It's really exciting.
Of course. Well, it's our pleasure. And it's our privilege to have you here. Because I was serious. I don't know anyone that really focuses and has the depth of knowledge that you do. So thanks for taking your time today and sharing that with us.
Thank you.
So let's start with at the beginning. When you're working with a customer and they're a business, and I think today we're going to focus the conversation really around this kind of B2B type of a business where they have low transactional volume. They have, a handful of clients, not a lot of clients. When you're working with them, how do you approach what they should do for their future marketing and their future customer research?
Yeah, so I think with B2B, especially if you're low transactional volume, that just means that each customer is worth a whole lot more. And therefore, that's why you want to understand them a whole lot more. So I usually start with, who their actual ideal customer is, not just the business, because a lot of the times they'll either say, oh, it's this kind of business with this revenue or this headcount or whatever. But it's like, okay, well, who within the organization are we targeting? And then we start there. Usually B2B businesses will stop it at like, oh, they're the CEO at a small startup, or they'll just really go into the role that they're playing, which I think is important. But one, roles are, they can get really confusing. I mean, there's just sometimes, and especially if you're working with startups, for example, some people hold different roles, or maybe there's not one dedicated role, or it's shared among people. So it's really identifying who that customer is, and if there's a difference between the buyer and the consumer, and who are we really trying to attract there. So when you have low volume, you really just want to hone in on 5 ideal customers and do a lot of in-depth interviews with them, because you're not going to get a whole lot of survey data, which is fine. And, you really want to get that really good, rich, qualitative data with those customers. So, for example, I worked with a B2B SaaS company. They provide on-demand customer service for e-com companies. So, they support people like what's one of the customers? Like Instacart, for example. When Instacart has a flood of inquiries, they only have so many in-house customer service reps. So they need someone like my client, on demand whenever they need to help them out with their customer service inquiries, whether that's chat, email, etc. and they don't want to use a call center. So when they came to me, what they thought was like, okay, they're just like, we know one of our ideal avatars is a support rep, but we don't know, like we don't know how to position to them. We don't know, what their pain points are and, what language they're speaking and like what they're trying to accomplish. So I usually start with a couple things. Like before I even do the actual interviews, I like to do a couple things. One is like what I call the matrix, where you're just taking two different attributes for these ideal avatars and just kind of applying them on a matrix. So maybe one axis is, oh, you're muted. Still can't hear you. Yeah, I can't hear you. Should I just keep going? I don't know. You probably had a question, or if you want to type it in the chat. Okay. So like, let's say that one of the axes is like, oh, sorry, what? Can you hear me?
Wait, no?
Oh, there you are.
Okay. It's like, what in the world just happened? I saw your screen flicker and I was like, I wonder if it was some pulse or something. Okay, sorry about that. This is exactly what I wanted to hear too, was your matrix, because I look at your matrix and that's a bit of magic that I haven't been able to figure out yet. And
yeah, so go ahead.
Well, I was going to add to that is when the demographical stuff is important. It's when do you make the distinction between role-based and person-based? Because you mentioned pains and you can't really get into the pains if you stay in the role realm. Is that true?
It just depends. I mean, like, for example, the one of the avatars I worked with was like a customer support person or customer support manager. And that's
right.
like very specific. Like that's not usually, called anything else. But if we were to work with like the head of e-com, however, that might be the director of marketing or the director of acquisition.
Right.
So you really just want to focus on the actual function itself than the job title.
Awesome. So explain this matrix. What are you talking about with that?
Yeah. So what I usually do is just take a look at the top 5 avatars and just see like what are the two top attributes that signal that they are ideal. So for example, with this customer support client I was working with the avatar, we identified the number of in-house customer service reps because we realized like there was like a sweet spot between the number of in-house customer support reps are. If there's too much, they likely may not need us. And but like the less that they have, the more likely they're going to need like an on-demand service. So that's one of them. And then we looked at the product that they're selling. So for example, if they're just selling socks, it's really easy for our team to learn support answers for socks. It's not like, a router or some really complex technology, because people are going to be asking product questions. And therefore, like we need to see like, okay, how easy is it for us to pick up those product questions? Like how niche are their products, or like how widely understood are their products? Or are they super narrow and they take a very like specific amount of knowledge? Because if so, then that means that, us getting them success is going to take a lot longer and they might be less ideal. And we want someone who's a little bit more mass understood, like, pair of socks or Instacarts, like groceries, So
versus the Zappos customer service rep who's probably primarily hired for empathy, right? Like, good to have 20-minute conversations about your love life rather than just, dealing with the shoes and returns and such. Like that's kind of what Zappos is known for, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like being that human. And I mean, that's what they pride themselves on, is like giving that human experience while, being accurate at the same time.
Right. So how how do you, when you're, if I'm a CEO and let's say I've got a B2B consulting company and I don't know, call it, say Microsoft enterprise level software. If I'm looking at this matrix, do I want to look at, do you have kind of standardized axes that you begin with, or how do I kind of make a decision around the axes?
It really depends on the customer. With the axes, typically what I've seen for B2B is you kind of want to look at it with the business as a whole. Sometimes you'll look at it from a very individual perspective, but what I said, like it's like number of in-house support reps and, the type of product that it is. That's usually like when you're thinking about like prospects and what makes them ideal, like that's what you really want to look at. And you kind of just narrow them down to the top two attributes that weed people out of whether or not they're a really good fit.
Okay, cool. And so once you have this, kind of the next step, and you have your top 5 ideal customers kind of roughly outlined, then you talked about doing these interviews.
Yeah. So with the interviews, those, depending on what you're trying to figure out, is how it will determine what you're going to be asking in the interview. So for this client in particular, they wanted to figure out their messaging for this avatar. So, I really just focused on the experience of what they're going through when they're going through the problem. So, for example, one of the questions I would ask is like, one, like, what's the structure of your customer support team? Just a very black and white question. And they'll tell me like, yeah, we have 3 in-house support reps. We have a call center and that's about it. One of them was like, yeah, I'm the only one. I'm handling everything myself. And then the other is like, well, I worked here for 5 years and I got promoted to manager and I have 1 rep under me. But where I get the gold is like, I'll just ask like, hey, when was the last time you had an unexpected influx of chats, emails, and customer support inquiries, and like what happened exactly? So they'll tell me their nightmare story of like the time they sent out like the wrong, shipping link, or the links were broken, or there was some PR disaster. And I remember one of them saying that one time when this happened, everyone in the company, including the C-level, was like answering support inquiries. And that's crazy. Like they should not be answering support inquiries, or their time is way too valuable. So you really get into the heart of their pains, and then you get really good stories to be telling your customers that really dimensionalize the pain and that really resonates to show that you understand exactly what they're going through.
Do you, how do you set up these calls? And I'm assuming that when you did this research, were these current clients of your client?
Most of them were current clients.
Going into, second tier, just similar job types?
They were current clients, and then one of them was a prospect. And usually, because they're B2B, they usually have a rep that's really close to them. Uh-huh. So they would ask to do the interview, and then they would introduce them to me. I wouldn't just go and like ask them cold.
So it's definitely a warm referral.
Yeah, exactly. And they're usually really happy to do it, especially because they were good at what they do and they were happy with, the software so far. So it was pretty easy to get people on the phone. Okay,
cool. Any tips about arranging those or prep work to make the calls better? I'm assuming you record them.
Yeah, I record them. So there's a couple things to get them to say yes. You really just have to like flatter them, like, hey, I've been really proud of all the work you've done, or like I was thinking about our star, our champion users, and you came to mind. You just want to make them feel really good about hopping on the phone, and you just want to make it clear that it's not a sales call. That they're just trying to understand you, so we can get more people just like you, more customers just like you. So you really want to be clear about the intent behind this. As far as preparing, I would always like ask for any background information that they have on this client, so that you're not spending the first 10, 15 minutes just getting that background. So I already like knew those surface level things, and therefore I could just like get into the heart of it after, warming them up a little bit. Mm-hmm. So definitely getting that kind of brief on who they are and like, how long they've been with them, what they worked on them with, that really helped me prepare, because usually like they won't want to commit to an hour long interview. You just say like 30, 45 minutes and then they'll stay longer. So also you just want to be as efficient as possible.
Is that what you shoot for, is about 45 minutes to an hour? Or?
Yeah, I'll usually say 45 minutes and then they're fine staying the extra 15 minutes.
See where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find that there's any value to having a third outside independent party doing this research?
Well, I could usually see things that the client can't.
Right. Like, you're unbiased.
Yeah, exactly. They're usually so deep in it and they're just so like in the weeds of the product that sometimes they'll just, get into product focused questions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, especially having someone who specializes in this stuff. And a lot of the times my clients won't even want to do interviews. And that's where my specialty comes in. It's because it's like, they just don't even want to get on the phone with these guys.
You mean as far as when you say they don't want to do interviews, they don't want to do the interviews?
Yeah. They don't want to run the interviews themselves.
I was going to say, because that's a whole nother conversation. I'd love to hear some of your online research methodologies. That's always I love that stuff too. But so you get them on the phone. Do you have your questions? You have a framework in your head when you're talking to them as far as what you want to dig into. How much leading do you do? Or do you just pose a situation and let them rip? Yeah,
I usually I'm trying to make them feel comfortable so they could, spill as many details as possible. But I usually just ask them a question and then just keep asking follow-up questions. So
just probing.
Yeah, just doing more probing and digging deeper. Cause like you really want to get to the heart of what they're trying to say. And usually they won't say it right away or right off the bat. So usually most of it's just follow-up questions to, any anecdotes that they're sharing.
Have you noticed, I've not done a ton of these interviews, but I've done a bunch, and it's interesting to me. I'm curious if you've had the same experience where we had a client once who was in this realm of cybersecurity, right? And it's one of those things where the awareness, everybody's aware of cybersecurity. And in particular, we were talking to banks. So the issue of cybersecurity was like not just aware, but paramount, right? Like that was the top surface level thing. And I was doing research for a company that had a piece of software that helped with that. But what I found interesting is, and I want to ask you about how many interviews you find sufficient, like what's that statistical relevance. But in about half the cases, I found we spent the first, and I try to shoot for 30, 45 minutes. The first 90% of the conversation was around this really obvious thing. And then almost without exception, in 4 or 5 of these conversations, it came out that this really obvious thing was kind of a pain in the butt, but it wasn't the real problem. What the real problem is they had this reporting issue and it was related to cybersecurity, but it really had to do with preparing the reports for the federal oversight and the federal agencies that were coming in. And that was the real pain point. And that was the real gold nugget that we discovered in doing these. Have you had the experience where you kind of think you're onto something and then you find out, 20 minutes, 30 minutes into the conversation, all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, the real gold's over here?
Yeah, sometimes. And I think that's the beauty of research is that like you get surprised and, you are proven wrong. I think it's great to have an open mind about being proven wrong because then, if you could have like your bias kicked in and say, let's, get back on track to what I was trying to get to. Because we're not necessarily journalists. I mean, journalists like have a narrative that they're trying to support, but this is like really just trying to understand the customer itself and wherever that leads to, like, great. I love those kinds of surprising insights.
Yeah, great point. You don't want to really have a narrative going into these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to like how many people you should be interviewing, it's not like surveying where you need like hundreds because that would take forever. I usually do 3 to 5, but it really depends. Like once you start hearing the same thing over and over and you're not getting surprises anymore, that's kind of when you know that you're on the right track and you could move on. So like I say shoot for at least 5, but if you're on the third one and you're like, there's, this is all the stuff that I'm hearing. I've validated all the stuff that I know. Like there's really no point in doing the extra 2 unless those extra 2 are, very different from the first 3, which they shouldn't really be if you've got your ideal avatar correct.
Yeah. Because I mean, the consequences of this research, right, are these companies are going to deploy resources to create marketing materials, and their entire forecasted budgets are dependent on them reaching the marketing goals, right? Like their sales forecasts, all this stuff. There's a lot of ramifications that happen because of this research, and that's one of the things I really want to highlight is while this may seem a little bit it's what's the word? It's not hard, AB black and white kind of research. It's very empirical. Is that the right word? Maybe
it's like qualitative.
Qualitative, that's the word. It's so important to do this research for these companies because it's a small hinge that swings a very big door in the coming months and years. Mm-hmm. So where you kind of know you've done enough when you start hearing the same stories, no new surprises, the research is panning out like you thought it would.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So you've done the research, and then where do you take it? We talked about you have it transcribed. Do you have a process for evaluating these calls and how you parse out what the needs and pains and problems are?
Yeah, it's really just sitting with it. It's like highlighting certain things and like seeing, what are the common phrases or words or sentiments that they're showing, and really just doing some deep thinking about what they're saying, and seeing if like there's anything that they're trying to say but couldn't say, and just like really taking those and categorizing them into different pain points. What are the problems that they're facing? And then like what's the dream results that they want, and really just categorizing those into those things, so that we can come up with their messaging for how we want to appeal to them and how their solution helps with these pains, helps with these problems, helps with the results. It shapes a couple of things. So it shapes the messaging, it shapes the copy. It shapes like the case studies that they're trying to provide. Cause like before, for example, like one thing that people will always say is like, I was really skeptical about this because, they use like AI technology to help them. And I was really skeptical about it. But then I saw that they were able to really emulate our brand voice and answer our customers and blah, blah, blah. But that wasn't in any of their case studies. But that's a real chief concern that people have when they're outsourcing their customer service. Is like, can they really serve our customers? Are people going to know that we're outsourcing it? So that's definitely part of the messaging or like part of their customer stories that they really need to include, is like those kinds of pain points, concerns, blocks, whatever that is. So it's really comes down to that messaging, and that's really helpful for your marketing team, your sales team, et cetera. But also, I mean, one thing that was really interesting that came out of this one client project is like we found out that these support people were quite alone because, they didn't really have like mentors or peers that they could really hang out with, because there just weren't that many conferences, events, resources, et cetera. So what they did was they created a Facebook community of all these people, and it's really grown ever since then. And they're getting a lot of customers there, and just like a lot of free marketing from this group. And when you're in B2B, people jump to different companies. So you want to really establish the relationship with them, not just in their work email, but like their personal Facebook. So that's been a really successful thing for them. And they've held like virtual summits. They were going to do an in-person summit, but obviously that didn't work out. No. And that's really like helped them be like at the top of the industry's mind, because they're like bringing people together. People are getting jobs from this. They're getting mentorship. They're really leveling up their careers. And it's just been insanely helpful for us, and like a really big part of their marketing.
That's an incredible idea. Plus a talent pool, right? It goes to show the culture and how important that is to the culture of the business and the functioning of it. That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's been really successful for them. They're continuing to do it. They do like, weekly Zoom calls where people just kind of hang out and gather. I mean, they're basically like the HubSpot for customer support people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome.
So how do you, okay, so you've done the research, you've sat with it, you've highlighted or whatever the process is you do with these interviews. Do you then distill it? And I know everybody leans towards making these, ideal client or avatar profiles. But how has it been your experience, or what do you find to put this research into a format that it becomes extremely useful to more than just, a few people in the company?
Yeah. So,
how do you kind of organize your research and present it, I guess?
Yeah, there's a couple things. So I'll just highlight the interviews and just do the takeaways and then some quotes. And then if they want to see the full transcript, they can do that too. There's a link for that. So, it's important that they know who did the interview and what they look like, what their name is, what business they're part of, what their role is, just so that they can use real examples. It's important that everyone in the company refers to real examples when they're referring to the avatar and not just this fake person that we made up.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like a real person has ramifications versus made up Sue and Billy.
Yeah. And anyone could refer to those interviews when they're planning an event, when they're writing email copy or landing page copy, when they're doing phone scripts for the sales team, or even just cold emails when they're creating campaigns. It's just really helpful for them to refer to those as it's just bite-sized highlights, supporting quotes. And then, if they want to watch the whole thing or read the whole thing, they can do that. Mm-hmm. So there's that piece. And then there's the jobs paying the gains I mentioned earlier. It's those bullet points with supporting quotes. You always want to have supporting quotes for any of these pieces of research, because it's having sources essentially. Mm-hmm. It's using
a citation.
Citations. Yeah, exactly. And then it's how where the client solution fits in to all of this. So it's what are the top 3 messaging points that we need to say in any conversation with them, especially for this avatar. So what makes us unique? What's our unique selling proposition? But what's the core messaging that we have? And what exactly do we offer that supports that? So that could be anything we're all US based, and that's a big thing because people will outsource their call center and they'll be abroad and, maybe there's some language barriers, et cetera, but that's not a problem because we have US based, resources. Mm-hmm. And that's helpful for pretty much anyone. That could be helpful for anyone who is just starting and they're onboarding. It's helpful for even our customer support team as they're interacting with these people, customer success, partnerships, sales, marketing. I mean, that's helpful for everyone just to know who or where we fit into this customer avatar's life. But the main thing that I like to do, especially for B2B companies, is there's usually a section at the beginning of this messaging book where it shows you how to use this. So it's if you're in this role, skip to this for this, and you can go to this section for this. So it's really clear that this is usable and here's how you can use it to get the most out of it. Because I found that a lot of the times profiles are either unusable or people just don't know how to use it. Yeah. But if we're just very clear about here's how to use this thing, it's an instruction manual. It'll be very much used among the entire company.
I love it. It's an instruction manual. That's what was missing. I never even thought of that, right? You need the instructions because those people in those positions and roles, they're not marketing people, obviously. That's why we're doing it. And you got to tell them what to do.
Yeah, exactly. Just show them, make it foolproof for them. And then, they'll see the benefits.
Another brilliant little nugget. So do you have any other, because I know we're coming up on our time here. I want to respect your time. Do you have any, outside of telephone calls, do you do any other research? Like how do you have any polish or end result techniques or things you like to do to kind of really wrap that package up, that customer research package when you hand it to a client?
I mean, if there are forums or Facebook groups of these people, I like to look at those.
You're going in there.
Yeah, Reddit threads. If there's a book on Amazon about this, I'll just read the reviews.
Mm-hmm.
With B2B, it's like not as easy to find that kind of stuff.
Right. And oftentimes,
if it were like weight loss, it's like there's plenty of Reddit threads, for example.
Exactly.
Look at that.
Like your customer service example, there's not a lot of Reddit threads for customer service reps.
Yeah. And maybe there is, I don't know, but, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I place a lot of heavy weight on the interview, and that's why it's so important to nail those interviews and make sure that you're getting, the information that you need out of them. But, I also like to spot check with some places on the internet like Amazon or any forums that are available.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, do you have any stories or last bits of wisdom that you'd like to share? I know before we get into, because a lot of people are going to be asking me like, what do you do? Or can they hire you to help do with this process? Right. But I'd love, like particularly you have this customer service example we've been talking about. How did, after you presented that research and they started using it, we've already heard this story of they created their own support group for customer service. Did you see how it translated and showed up in their company and their marketing moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most successful campaigns they did is called the Mystery Shop campaign, where they take their target accounts, like let's say it's Nike and Hotwire, and they'll get a third-party research firm to mystery shop them. So pretend that they're a customer, and they'll put it in a support inquiry, and then they'll basically say like, okay, here's how you performed, and here's and they'll do like 100 companies. So they'll say like, this is the average that people were doing. Like 90% of people didn't respond within the first hour, kind of thing, and like here is where you fell in. So it's a really intriguing way to get those companies' attention, because, they're getting sold to all the time. They're really big. They have big budgets, et cetera. So people are fighting for their attention. So people want to know like, how did I score? And I mean, that's one thing that we learned from our research was like, they're very performance based, and they're very much like all about, response time and satisfaction scores and all that stuff. So by us, like, not only are we doing them a favor by, giving them an audit, but we're also like mystery shopping their competitors. So they want to see like where they fall or compare to their competitors. And they got an incredible response from that. Like we offered like analysis sessions where we just like show them how they did, but people were just like, I don't want my analysis session. I just want to talk to your sales team. Yeah. So it's pretty amazing how well that campaign perfored.
That all came out of your research.
Yeah. It had a really big part to do with that. Yeah. Especially because, they're just so like, they're like marketers in that they're very into their metrics. Mm-hmm. So, being able to show them their metrics was just really eye-opening for them.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that example I used where they were in the banking sector with the cybersecurity stuff, they ended up, all their marketing to that date was around cybersecurity and this really obvious problem. But it wasn't until they started talking about, their reporting features and how they solved that enormous problem. And at the end of the day, they could actually put a quantitative dollar amount on what that was worth to a client. And it was like, holy smokes, it changed the entire company from top to bottom.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, all right, we have 1 minute left. I'm I want to get to like kind of what's your special magic power and how can people reach out to you? And I know you have the book you wrote behind you. Let's hear, how can people get a hold of you and tap into your expertise in the future?
Yeah, you can visit AlisonCarpio.com to, learn more about me and, apply to work with me. If you want a free copy or electronic copy of my book, it's at theconversionkitchen.com/book. You can grab a copy there. And, you'll be put into my email sequence, so you can always reply to any of those emails. But yeah, I mean, I could either do all of this for you. I can coach someone in your organization to do it if they have time. But just know that
you do coaching.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Cause I think it's great if someone in-house knows how to do the interviews. Like, I don't like when people rely on me to do it, cause that's just such a valuable skill to have. Cause, you're going to be doing, interviews like ongoing. So it's good to have that resource in-house.
Okay, cool. Or you do offer, you will do it for them if need be.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. All right. Well, we've hit our mark on time. Thank you so very much for taking your time today. I know you have an extremely busy schedule, and I'm grateful you did do that for me.